Good morning everyone, this is Mike.
And this is Pauline E.
And we start off with the Society News for Friday the 22nd of June 2018. On Tuesday there will be 2 coffee mornings held in aid of the Society on Tuesday the 26th of June. The first in the West Wight at the end of the Line Cafe at Yarmouth from 10:30 a.m. until 12 p.m. and the second in Bembridge at the Cloisters from 10:15 a.m. until 12 p.m. Please go along and support these if you are able. Laura Jasper will be attending the coffee morning at Bembridge and will be taking along some low vision aids and magnifiers. The swimming group are meeting this Tuesday the 26th of June in Ryde at the waterside pool. The pool is closed to the public whilst the group swims. There are male and female volunteers to help you get in and out of the pool, as well as lifeguards to ensure your safety. To join the group, please call the Society first to notify us of your swimming ability. On Wednesday, the weekly coffee morning will be held at Millbrook House this Wednesday on the 27th of June from 10:30 a.m. The coffee mornings are not just for blind and partially sighted people. Anybody can come along and have a cup of coffee or tea as well as a piece of cake. We will also be holding the low vision drop in between 10 a.m. and 12 noon on Wednesday the 27th of June. This is a weekly event that allows you to view and try the low vision equipment we have at the Society without the need for an appointment. On Thursday, the Thursday Social Group are meeting on Thursday the 28th of June at Millbrook House. The group meets from 10:30 a.m. until 2 p.m. You can knit or just have a chat. Then later in the afternoon, volunteers come in and read to the group from different topics. On Friday, the Striders group will be meeting on Friday the 29th of June for 5.5 mile walk from West Ningwood to Shorewell. The minibus will leave Millbrook House at 10 a.m. The walk will start opposite Hampstead Road on the Ningwood Hill. Lunch is booked for 1 p.m. at the New Inn in Shelfleet.
Any other news? The site for Wight office opening times have changed from Monday the 18th of June. The office will be staffed Monday to Thursday 9 a.m. till 4:30 p.m. and Friday 9 till 4 p.m. The next freshwater book group for the visually impaired will be held on Tuesday the 26th of June at 11 a.m. in Freshwater Library. This friendly group meets once a month to discuss the previous month's book, receive copies of the next book and enjoy refreshments. If you would like to attend, please go along to Freshwater Library on the 26th of June at 11 a.m. The group lasts about an hour. The Isle of Wight Fellowship meeting will be held at Bethany Evangelical Church, Union Street, Newport on Saturday the 30th of June at 3 p.m. The speaker this month is Mr. Richard Salmon. There will be hymns, a quiz, story reading and a short Christian message, followed by tea. A collection is taken from which donations are made to the Torch Trust for the Blind. Hymn books and scripture are available in large print and braille. For further details, please contact Jackie Moore on 520797. The Millbrook House Coffee Morning on Wednesday the 4th of July will be joined by the Isle of Wight Macular Group for their monthly meeting, as well as Jenny Ball, who will be hosting the Macular Society Coffee Morning as part of Macular Week. Fresh cakes will be available and all are welcome. If you are interested in joining the Sight for Wight Supper Club, or if you would like more information, please contact Laura Jasper on 522205 or email members@iwsb.org.uk by the 28th of June. The RNIB will be delivering another Living with Sight Loss course on Friday the 6th of July at the Riverside Centre in Newport. The course runs from 10 a.m. till 3:15 p.m. and covers local and national support services, emotional and physical well-being, making the most of your vision, getting out and about safely and confidently, reading and information solutions. The course is for anyone affected by sight loss, including those who have lived with it for a while. Partners, carers and friends are welcome. Refreshments, including a sandwich lunch, are provided. To book a space, please call 0303 123 3933 or email iwslenquires@rnib.org.uk. Local volunteers from the Guide Dogs charity will be visiting a number of venues over the next few months, talking about the work of the charity and how you can be involved. They will be at Sandown Library on the 23rd of June, Ryde Library on the 21st of July and Ventnor Library on the 18th of August. All the library venue times will be 10:30 a.m. till 2:30 p.m. You can also find them at the Isle of Wight Community Club Open Day at Park Road in Cowes on August the 27th from 12 noon onwards. Do you enjoy the activities and facilities provided by Sight for Wight? Perhaps you've recently attended an activity or event and would like to wax lyrical about it. If so, then Chris Kane would like to hear from you. As part of our promoting well-being and supporting services and activities, we would like to hear your positive feedback, which will be part of a video promoting Sight for Wight. If you have a story you would like to enthuse about and don't mind being recorded on video, then please contact Chris Kane on 522205 or email admin@iwsb.org.uk.
And now we move on to the scaffolding news, which includes scaffolding or hoardings. We are unable to include end dates as many are extended on a week-by-week basis. Also included are tables and chairs permits that have been issued in the past week. In the Bay and Ventnor area, there is currently scaffolding at the Premier Inn, which is 1 to 9 Esplanade at Sandown, 11A and 11B St John's Road, Sandown, 79 High Street, Sandown. The Toymaster at 103 High Street, Sandown, scaffold up in Albion Road for that. 40 Little Stairs Road at Shanklin, Shanklin Hotel, Eastmount Road, Shanklin, United Reformed Church in the High Street, Shanklin, 39 Atherley Road, Shanklin, corner of Trinity Road and Madeira Road in Ventnor, 1 Boniface Road and into Trinity Road, Ventnor, Hose Rose Dixon's 1 High Street, Ventnor, 21 West Street, Ventnor, 2 Eleanor House, Grove Road, Ventnor. There are currently hoardings at Wight City, Culver Parade, Sandown, Premier Inn, 1 to 9 Esplanade, Sandown, and United Reformed Church in the High Street at Shanklin. There are currently skips at 26 South Street, Ventnor, and 25 Leeson Road, Ventnor. New scaffolding is due at the Railway Bridge, Avenue Road, Shanklin from the 10th of September, and new skips are due at 20 Lamorby Terrace in Lake from the 2nd of July.
And in the Cowes area, there is currently scaffolding at the Royal London Yacht Club, the Parade, Cowes, Sainsbury's, 129 to 130 High Street, Cowes, 91 High Street, Cowes, 93 High Street, Cowes behind hoarding, 78 Park Road, Cowes, 40 Osborne Road, East Cowes. There are currently hoardings at 93 High Street, Cowes, and there is currently a cherry picker at Cabin on the Green, Queen's Road, Cowes, and this is the 22nd of June for filming Thundercats Yachts at Sea. And at Egypt Point Lighthouse, Egypt Esplanade, Cowes, 22nd of June for filming Thundercats Yacht at Sea. There are currently skips at 42 St Andrew Street, Cowes, 4 Trafalgar Court, Terminus Road, Cowes, and new scaffolding is due at Carville Court, Terminus Road, Cowes from the 2nd of July.
Now we move to the Newport area. There is currently scaffolding at 18 Lugley Street, Newport, 46 to 48 Lugley Street, Newport, Domino's, St James's Street, Newport, W.H. Smith, 55 to 56 High Street, Newport, Therapy at 2 to 8 Carisbrook Road, Newport. Wight Mountain Bike Shop at St James's Street, Newport. 2 Avondale Road, Newport. Farnsworth Newsagent at 76 St James's Street, Newport. Visual Impact, Holyrood Street, Newport. And new scaffolding is due at 33 to 34 High Street Ryde on the 2nd of July.
Okay, now it's the Ryde area. There is currently scaffolding at Clinton Cards, High Street Ryde, W.H. Smith, 20 to 21 High Street Ryde, 26 George Street Ryde, the Colonnade, Lind Street Ryde, 13 Cross Street Ryde, Charcoal Grill, 65A Union Street Ryde, Kids & Co, 22 High Street Ryde, and the scaffolds on Anglesey Street. Bakehouse, Stean Road, Seaview. There are currently skips at Sand Cove Pier Road, Seaview, Rockcliffe, Circular Road, Seaview, 11 Glendale Close, Wootton. New scaffolding is due at 4 St Michael's Avenue Ryde from the 2nd of July, and new skips are due at 33 Surrey Street Ryde from the 2nd of July.
And we move on to the West Wight area. There is currently scaffolding at Memorial Hall, Avenue Road, Freshwater, Joe Joss, School Green Road, Freshwater, and there are currently skips at 8 St Michael's Close, Sharfleet.
This week's In Touch. In touch in this week's episode, Talk and Support and David Katz. The RNIB says it could make up to 100 redundancies to ensure the help it offers blind people efficient and sustainable. It reported a deficit of around £13 million in the financial year before March 2017. We've heard about 3 of the early redundancies, and they will affect the Talk and Support service, which links up blind people on a conference call with a volunteer to offer advice and help. Diane Betchman is one such volunteer, and she is concerned about the impact of the change. We also talked to David Katz about a question affecting many visually impaired people, to reveal or not to reveal. For years he employed a number of techniques to hide his sight problems while establishing himself as a renowned Fleet Street photographer. He tells us how he managed it. And this is presented by Peter Wight and produced by Kevin Core.
And now we move on to the Isle of Wight County Press for the 22nd of June 2018. And the headlines are Edward's long wait for cannabis oil and judges throw out students' appeal. And we start off with Edward's long wait for cannabis oil. An epilepsy sufferer who broke his neck and spine in violent seizures has been waiting 3 years for cannabis oil, he says, could cure him. In the week, the case of 12-year-old Billy Caldwell sparked a national debate about the prescriptions of cannabis oil after his medication was confiscated at Heathrow Airport. 31-year-old Edward Gentry from Cowes said he was placed on a waiting list for a cannabis oil trial in 2015. 3 years on, his family still have no idea if or when he will be given access to the oil. Edward, a graphic designer, said he feels as if his life is on hold while he waits for treatment. At his worst, he had as many as 40 seizures a day. He said he is unable to find a job because some days he just rolls in and out of seizures, making it difficult to meet deadlines. I am sick of having seizures, he said. Life is quite hard and lonely. It's just exhausting having that many seizures every day. Edward, who was born with brain damage, first began experiencing seizures when he was 14. They are sensory based, so even a light gust of wind coming through the window is enough to set him off. He now takes 3 different drugs, bringing the number of seizures down. However, At one point, a concoction of medication made him so psychotic his parents had no choice but to have him arrested twice. His family are desperately hoping cannabis oil could be the cure they are waiting for. "We simply need the drugs," said his father. "It's not enough about getting high or recreational use. That clouds the argument." Edward added, "We do not know if it will work for me, but I'd like to be given a chance." Edward now lives in a padded flat 9 seconds away from the family home. His parents have tried to minimise the number of sharp corners or places he could hurt himself during a seizure. However, his head is covered in scars, and he has had surgery for his broken spine and neck. Anyone seeking to obtain a licence would have to be referred by a clinician to the Medicines and Healthcare Products Regulatory Agency. Ireland MP Bob Seeley said, "It's got nothing to do with getting high, it's about preserving life. People are suffering, we should just get on with it." Mr. Seeley said he was compiling evidence of residents affected by the ban on prescribing cannabis oil in the UK. On Tuesday, Home Secretary Sajid Javid announced a major review into medicinal cannabis. In the UK, cannabis remains in Schedule 1 under the Misuse of Drugs Act, which labels it as having no medical value. The active ingredient in cannabis, THC, is illegal, and possession can result in a jail sentence of up to 5 years. CBD and tetrahydrocannabinol, which is THC, are 2 types of cannabinoids found naturally in the resin of the marijuana plant. A cannabis-based drug called Sativex, which contains THC and CBD, has been licensed in the UK to treat MS. Another cannabinoid drug, called Nabilone, is sometimes used to relieve sickness for people undergoing chemotherapy. Trials are underway to test cannabis-based drugs for other conditions, including cancer pain, appetite loss in people with HIV and AIDS, and epilepsy in children. In theory, doctors could prescribe it for other things outside this license, but do so at their own risk. Edward's mother, Judith, said they hadn't given up hope of being put on a trial for cannabis oil. "We will continue fighting for him. We just need everyone else to catch up first."
And our second headline: Judges throw out students' appeal. Ryan Cooper, the Isle of Wight law student who killed Gunville man Gary Stacey with a single punch in 2016, failed to convince senior judges to set him free at an appeal hearing. Cooper, 23, of Almore Road, Southampton, was jailed for 6 years at Winchester Crown Court on April the 12th last year. He was convicted of the manslaughter of Mr. Stacey on Valentine's Day 2016. He admitted punching the 49-year-old following a verbal disagreement in St James's Street, Newport, at about 4 a.m. Mr. Stacey suffered a fractured eye socket and hit his head on the ground, causing a fatal bleed on the brain. Cooper had claimed at trial he acted in self-defence after the victim moved towards him with clenched fists. Last Friday at London's Appeal Court, William Mailsley QC argued Cooper's conviction was unsafe and should be overturned. The trial judge should not have allowed 2 pieces of evidence to go before the jury, he told Lord Justice Irwin and 2 other senior judges. One related to Cooper taking cocaine on the night of the attack, and the other to text messages he had sent to his girlfriend. Expert evidence showed traces of cocaine in Cooper's urine sample given to police, the court heard. He'd sent a text message to friends saying, "I just did the biggest line of cocaine." Mr. Mailsley argued the evidence was not relevant to the attack on Mr. Stacey and had a significant prejudicial effect on the jury. But Lord Justice Irwin said the cocaine evidence was relevant and admissible as to Cooper's credibility and as to his state of mind. The text messages between Cooper and his girlfriend several months before the attack included him saying he was going to lose it if they ever broke up. He would be so aggressive and fight anyone out if their relationship ended, he wrote. The judge was entitled to consider this evidence as bearing on his credibility and his state of mind that evening, said Lord Justice Irwin. It was properly admitted and does not render the conviction unsafe, he added. The appeal against conviction is dismissed. Mr. Mousley also argued Cooper's 6-year jail term was far too tough and should be reduced. He pointed to his relative youth and previously clean record. But the appeal judge said this sentence is not capable of challenge. It is not manifestly excessive.
Heartbreak of parents trying to get autism diagnosed. A mother has spoken of her family's 4-year battle for an autism diagnosis and said the anguish drove her husband to attempt suicide. Unable to cope with watching his son struggle at school, as the family begged for help from health and social workers, he took an overdose of prescription medication and spent 3 days in hospital. His wife, who has asked to remain anonymous, flagged up her son's condition with the Isle of Wight Council 10 years ago, when he was 3 years old, after he became increasingly aggressive towards his younger brother and starting biting other children. When she raised the issue at his primary school, she said the head teacher told her everyone has a little bit autistic. She moved her son to another school, but when he started wetting himself at school, she pulled him from full-time education. He is now 13, and at 8 he was diagnosed at the Autism Diagnostic Research Centre, that's ADRC, in Southampton. He was among hundreds of island children on a waiting list as the centre struggled with a huge backlog of referrals. His mum said the anxiety left her and her husband feeling suicidal, but said she had to stay strong for their 3 sons. She said, "Sometimes I have dark days too, and I think, what's the point? But there is no one to care for my boys. People ask me how I do it, and I say, you just have to get on with it." Her youngest son suffers from cerebral palsy. She said there was not enough support for parents of autistic children, and her family had been assigned multiple social workers rather than a dedicated caseworker who understood their needs. "It's like a revolving door. None of them stick around for too long," she said, saying it felt Island Services had given up on her family. The boy's mum said her husband had recovered and the couple had learnt to communicate and cope. As previously reported, the ADRC said in October last year it was unable to cope with demand and stopped taking new referrals. The diagnosis role was taken on by the Isle of Wight NHS Trust, but healthcare bosses on the Trust and clinical commission groups, which is CCG, have warned it will take over a year to clear the backlog of 150 referrals. The council previously said a formal autism diagnosis was not required to access special educational needs support, but parents told the county press that was not their experience. In the wake of the county press's reports on autism diagnosis delays, numerous parents contacted the paper to share their stories. They spoke of long delays and a lack of communication from the council and health workers. One said, "Communication is still non-existent, despite reassurances this would change. It feels more than ever nobody actually cares about the people who are affected by this, disabled children and their families." Despite the emphasis repeatedly placed by the Council and Health Service on the importance of agencies working together to ensure families receive the right support, when asked to comment, both organisations said autism diagnosis delays were not their responsibility. The county press was advised to contact the CCG, which also failed to respond.
A shake-up of the Isle of Wight Council's senior management team will cost the authority almost £400,000 a year. The council is set to appoint a host of new managers, including an assistant chief executive who will be paid £92,000 a year, almost £2,000 a week. With pension contributions and national insurance, the post will cost the council £125,000, rising to almost £130,000 over 3 years. Council Chief Executive John Metcalfe said the authority needed to spend money to make money. Other roles include strategic managers for highways and transportation and planning and infrastructure, each of which will cost the council £90,000. The restructure is designed to fill the void left by years of hollowing out the council's corporate management structure, but critics said the money could be better spent on teachers and social workers. Mr Metcalfe said the new positions were justified and would enable the council to progress potential money-making ideas over the next 5 years. He said eventually the positions would pay for themselves. 2 existing positions, Head of Place and Head of Contract Management, will be axed as part of the restructure, and the council will take on 2 graduate trainees costing almost £70,000 a year and an apprentice. Mr Metcalfe said, "We need to do things differently so we don't have to go through this constant round of cuts. The authority needs to slash more than £15 million from its budget in the next 3 years. And Mr Metcalfe said the new roles would be focused on finding new partnerships and business opportunities. The plans were criticised by the Isle of Wight Labour Party, which said the money could be used to provide teachers, social workers or call centre staff. Mr Metcalfe said people would say we could take the £380,000 and spend that on services, which is absolutely right, we could. But you can only use it once and then the money is gone. This is about spending the £380,000 so you don't have to cut services. The money to pay for the changes will come from the transformation budget, a £2 million fund set aside over the last few years. The restructure plan was not made public until last week after the decision had been made. Mr Metcalfe said, ultimately in the council's constitution it's my decision given we have the transformation budget.
Allowances paid to the council members rises by £3,000. Total spending by the Isle of Wight Council on members' allowances increased by £3,000 this year. There was a total spending of £461,128 during 2017-18. However, this also includes members from previous administration. Councillors were elected to their positions last May, 5 months into the financial year. Once former councillors are subtracted, current councillors claimed £443.29 this year, compared to the previous year when they had claimed £440,167. All members are given a basic allowance of £6,892.67, which certain members, such as cabinet members, are given an additional special responsibilities allowance. They are also allowed to claim for travel off the island and childcare expenses, although no councillors claim for childcare this year. The biggest allowance was given to council leader Councillor David Stewart, who was given £15,400 on top of the basic allowance, as well as £2,274 in travel expenses, totalling £25,374. This is an increase on previous leader Jonathan Bacon, who was given £21,331 during 2016-17. Deputy leader Councillor Stuart Hutchinson was paid £18,400, which includes a £9,625 special responsibilities allowance, as well as £1,076 for travel. Previous deputy Steve Stubbings was paid £16,017. Councillors Ian Ward and Wayne Whittle were both paid more than £16,000. Council spokesman said, when comparing councillor allowances year on year, it is worth noting a different governance structure existed in 2017-18 to that in 2016-17. The 2016-17 allowances will, in part, relate to a period when the council was under control of the independent administration. As such, the governance arrangements, as the number of executive members, in place at that time is not comparable with 2017-18. In January 2017, the leader and deputy leader resigned from the positions, and the special responsibility would have transferred to the caretaker's leader, Councillor Dave Stewart, and deputy leader, Councillor Stuart Hutchinson. Therefore, the cost of the previous leader/deputy leader is not a full year cost. The additional time spent as caretaker would also account for the additional payments made to Councillors Stewart and Hutchinson.
Police step up patrols in town. Neighbourhood policing officers are carrying out regular patrols in Newport Town Centre to address concerns raised by residents about antisocial behaviour. Officers said they had recorded more than 20 incidents since the start of May, including antisocial behaviour such as verbally abusive and disruptive behaviour and street drinking. Many of these reports have related to the Church Lytton and bus station area in the centre of town. Inspector Rob Abel said, "We are working with our colleagues from the Community Safety Partnership and are regularly patrolling problem areas for antisocial behaviour, which has been identified to us in Newport. The message to those people responsible for nuisance and antisocial behaviour issues is simple. We will take action, and this could lead to you having a criminal record. This in turn could affect your eligibility for employment, your ability to borrow money, or may mean you cannot travel to countries such as the United States in the future. We have a number of powers to tackle antisocial behaviour, and these include community resolutions, dispersal orders, fixed penalty notices, acceptable behaviour contracts and criminal behaviour contracts. The far preferable thing is for us to actually approach people and have a conversation, discuss the issues and ask them to refrain from being antisocial. By resolving the issue at the time, it benefits all parties involved. The success of this work comes as a result of excellent partnership working and the commitment of our hard-working police and community officers who face very challenging conditions to ensure the Isle of Wight community remains safe."
Wight Link raises pier parking fees. Free parking at Ryde Pier has been slashed from an hour to just 20 minutes. Wight Link has introduced the new rules from Tuesday to free up more spaces for customers and will install number plate recognition cameras to enforce them. It means drivers dropping off and picking up passengers will only be able to wait for 20 minutes without buying a ticket. They will still have to pay the £1 toll for driving along the pier. Criticising the new rules, Ryde Town Councillor Julian Critchley said, 20 minutes is completely insufficient to pick up relatives or friends from the pier. The boats are frequently 5 to 10 minutes later than advertised. People will be caught out by fines even if they have turned up on time through no fault of their own. Even those who do take less than 20 minutes may find in their anxiety that they feel compelled to pay a further fee to avoid the threat of a fine. A cynic might suggest this was in fact Wight Link's plan to make people pay for something they don't use. A Wight Link spokesman said the automatic number plate recognition camera will be at the wet end of the pier, so the time taken to drive up the pier isn't included in the 20-minute waiting time. If drivers want to stay on the pier beyond 20 minutes, it costs £1.70 to park for up to 2 hours. Wight Link's fast cats are reliable and run on time. In May 2018, 99.2% of the timetabled services operated on schedule, reliability, and 97.4% departed on time, punctuality. Customers can sign up for the latest updates on sailings via email and text message. Wight Link's website and the Wight app show the service status of all vessels so drivers can find out if there are any delays to services before they set out to the port. 4 new ticket machines will replace the 3 old ones, taking payment by cash or card, and customers will also be able to pay via a mobile app. Wight said parking charges would not increase for the rest of the year and would remain free for motorcycles and bicycles.
A hoard of silver coins dating from the 15th century, a coin brooch minted in Wareham and a fragment of an Anglo-Saxon silver gilt brooch were declared treasure by the Isle of Wight coroner. The silver groat coins were found near Calbourne and were lost or buried in the mid to late 1440s or very early in the 1450s. The groat was the coin of 4p, the largest of the 5 silver denominations then in circulation. Also found in the West Wight was an incomplete coin brooch from an arm and sceptre silver penny of Harthacnut as sole king, that's 1040 to 1042, and minted by Sideman at Wareham, Dorset. There are 4 silver rivets for attachment fittings located on the reverse of the piece. One of the rivets shows evidence of oxidisation and is probably a baser metal than the original coin. Finally found near Calbourne was a fragment of an Anglo-Saxon small square-headed silver gilt brooch dating from around 450 to 550 AD. Coroner Caroline Summery declared the finds to be treasure.
Roundabout scheme on hold until review. A decision on the future of St Mary's Roundabout has been postponed until the Isle of Wight Council receives further information about Coppins Bridge. Proposals to change the road layout have been drawn up as part of wider plans funded by a £9.6 million government grant to improve traffic flow around Newport. The work, which would be carried out in 8 phases, could see the entire network between the Asda development and Camp Hill overhauled and the lower part of Newport High Street pedestrianised. The phase, which involves Coppins Bridge, will be brought forward to run concurrently with improvements to St Mary's Roundabout. Speaking at the Cabinet meeting last Thursday, Transport Cabinet member Councillor Ian Ward said the scope of the project was being expanded to include Coppins Bridge, but further information was needed about the traffic flow first. He said the project would benefit from looking at wider picture. Coppins Bridge and the road to Coppins Bridge as well. They are strategic junctions. That's why the decision has been pushed back until we have reports from the second phase. Ward Councillor Andrew Garrett said he welcomed the expanded project.
Antiques Roadshow, filmed at Osborne House, will be broadcast on BBC One this Sunday at 8 p.m. Fiona Bruce and the team visited Queen Victoria's favourite seaside residence last September, and islanders and visitors from the mainland queued for hours to show the experts their antiques. Among the heirlooms was a globe-trotting trunk, an original shawl once used as a dog blanket, and a Japanese jar found in a water tank. Thanks to a locket, the episode sees participant Hilary Kay learn not everyone has heard of the Beatles, while Geoffrey Munn unlocks a secret code on a Russian brooch.
A bookshop leads a typewriter revival. An independent bookseller has been listed as an essential place to visit on the Isle of Wight by Time Out, thanks to its stock of trendy typewriters. Babushka Books in Shanklin was noted for the work it does to revive the near-lost love of typewriters. Reuben Simpson Little, who has been the shop custodian for the last decade, said, "What with computer technology and now smartphones and tablets, the humble mechanical typewriter appeared to be lost. But much like the revival in vinyl records over the past few years, there has been a small but growing family of typewriter enthusiasts who have been trying to introduce them to a younger audience, ourselves included. We are, I believe, the only remaining typewriter specialists left on the island. We buy, sell, service and refurbish them, and this year's business has been buoyant. The younger buyers all seem to go for the brightly coloured or chrome machines, whereas the older generations are buying for practicality. It's been great to see the love people have for them and the excitement at taking one home to use that our customers have shown. Time Out recommended 11 things for visitors to the Isle of Wight to do. They should visit St Catherine's Oratory, the Needles, West Wight Alpacas and the Isle of Wight Steam Railway. They should eat at Locks Lane in Bembridge, Little Gloucester in Gurnard, the Bandstand in Sandown, and take afternoon tea at the Royal Hotel in Ventnor. The more adventurous should also set sail on the Contessa 32 and practice yoga on a paddleboard with ice surf.
A thieving grandmother and grandson swindled their shop owner bosses out of £12,000 in stolen scratch cards. Jacqueline Johnson, 68, of Pelham Road Cows, and Kieran Johnson, 23, of Cranley Gardens Cows, admitted theft when they appeared at the Isle of Wight Crown Court. The owners had sunk around £50,000 of their savings into the shop, Chivertons of Cows, and had taken on the Johnsons in October 2016 as they had retail experience. Last year, however, they realised the shop was not making money and the reserves were diminishing. They could not understand why and started to investigate. It was then the owner of a nearby shop told them the Johnsons were regularly cashing in winning scratch cards. They'd been stealing from the Chivertons, and although it was impossible to say exactly how much money the owners had lost, they estimated it was between £10,000 and £12,000. Although the thefts were carried out over less than 3 months, Mr Blaine said they cost the owners around £900 a week. On one occasion, almost 200 scratch cards, each worth between £2 and £5, went missing in a single day. The court heard the Johnsons were of previous good character. Rebecca Austin, representing the Johnsons, said her clients were once popular and trusted, but now had to look their loved ones in the eye and know they looked at them differently. There is no excuse for what they did. It was immaturity, naivety and stupidity. This is a small community. That shame will carry with them forever. They're truly sorry, she said. Recorder Malcolm Gibney gave the pair a 6-month jail sentence, suspended for 2 years, and ordered them to complete 75 hours of unpaid work. No order for compensation was made.
Hendrix rings out at Afton again. The searing guitar tones of Jimi Hendrix cascaded across the fields of East Afton Farm as the BBC conjured up the spirit of the original Isle of Wight festivals this week. The broadcaster was on the island to film footage for a documentary to be screened in late summer to mark the 50th anniversary of the original Isle of Wight festival on September the 1st, 1968. That event, starring Jefferson Airplane, Crazy World of Arthur Brown, Tyrannosaurus Rex and the Pretty Things, drew a 15,000-strong crowd to Ford Farm at Whitwell, and sparked the much bigger island events in 1969 at Wootton Bay, headlined by Bob Dylan, and the 1970 festival at East Afton Farm with a massive bill topped by Hendrix. Present-day Isle of Wight festival promoter John Giddings was on hand as Chris Hewitt of CH Vintage Audio assembled a stack of original Island Festival WEM sound gear, speaker stacks, mixing desk and Marshall amplification. It was the very gear used by Hendrix, The Who, Free, The Moody Blues and many other bands at East Afton in 1970. Also on hand were island residents Dick Taylor of the Pretty Things and Nick Turner, an ex-Hawkwind band member. Taylor and his band played at the 68 festival, while Hawkwind unofficially played at the 1970 event on Desolation Alley, on a makeshift stage with bands playing to fans without tickets. The Pretty Things will be playing at this year's Isle of Wight festival, which begins this week, and also at the All White Now 1968 retrospective event at Tapnor Farm on September the 1st. when they will be billed as The Pretty Things meets JC and Angelina. Mr. Giddings said, "I love this recreation and I support the All Wight Now event to mark the 50th anniversary. Anything that promotes the island and marks such great events has to be good. I have always wanted to do that ever since we brought the festival back in 2002. Seeing this fine old gear used by the greats of yesterday is just great." Dick Taylor said, "The highlight for me was being on the same bill as Jefferson Aeroplane. To get them to the island was just unreal at the time. I also remember Arthur Brown, of course, and his famous trick of setting his hair on fire, or appearing to. Great memories." Nick Turner played a medley on saxophone before the original Hendrix tapes were played through the WEM stacked gear, and music again filled the air. And on that musical note, we say goodbye to you.
So goodbye from Pauline.
And it's goodbye from Mike. Bye-bye, everyone.
Continuing the Isle of Wight County Press news, I'm Vivian.
And I'm Peter Boffin.
So, here we go. Rowing round the island in 24 hours. Ventnor man Paul Berry is rowing round the Isle of Wight in 24 hours in honour of lost loved ones. He intends to row single-handed round the island in a boat built by his grandfather, Jim Blake, and named after his grandmother, Rosemary. Weather permitting, Paul, 30, plans to start his challenge on June the 30th. He will raise money for 2 charities. He explained, "It's a project which is very close to my heart. I'm calling it Rowing for Reason, which will support 2 chosen funds, Papyrus and the Ellen MacArthur Cancer Trust. Papyrus sets out to prevent suicides of male and females who are 35 years old and under. This year marks the 10th anniversary of the death of my stepfather, Dal Blake Bevan, who took his own life 1 week before his 30th birthday, so the connection is obvious. The other charity is the Ellen MacArthur Cancer Trust, which supports young people in building confidence after recovering from cancer treatment through sailing. My nan lost her decade-long battle with cancer last year. It was her name my grandfather gave to the boat. Since the new year, Paul has been lovingly restoring Rosemary and put her back in the water in May. He has put in many hours of training ever since. He said, "I've been rowing these waters since I was 5 years old, so I know my way about, which is lucky since the last leg from St Catherine's to Ventnor will be after dark." Paul plans to use the spring tides to get the maximum benefits of the currents, and he will be going anti-clockwise. The distance is about 54 nautical miles, or 62 statute miles. He will be accompanied by a safety boat courtesy of MMC Diving Services, which will be joined by another at the Needles, courtesy of Cheetah Marine in Ventnor. To donate or follows Paul progress, follow at Rowing for Reason on Facebook.
And here's one about missing crutches appeal. Unreturned crutches cost the Isle of Wight National Health Service Trust thousands of pounds last year. The Trust has issued an appeal for crutches and another walking aids to be returned by patients who no longer need them. And the cost of one pair of crutches is just under £10, and in 2017 and 18 the Trust spent £11,505 on replacing and repairing equipment. The annual figure also included equipment that was replaced due to wear and tear. And for every 50 pairs of crutches issued to patients, only 10 are returned. Crutches and other walking aids, including Zimmer frames, are provided on a short-term loan basis to National Health Service patients. Although the emergency department has not run out of available crutches, it has run very low at times. And the spokesman for the crutch said, if every pair we issued was returned, we would only need to buy a few new pairs every year to replace those that have been damaged, worn out, or to cope with increased demand. Crutches can be returned to the emergency department or to the community equipment store at 19 Berry Way, Newport.
Man jailed for £11,000 scam. Swindling £11,000 out of a man with learning difficulties by posing as a woman on an online dating site landed a homeless fraudster in prison. Robert Brown, 31, created a false identity as Emma Thompson on the Plenty of Fish website and sent naked pictures of Emma to his victim between the 2nd of March and May the 25th last year. Brown, of no fixed address, admitted a charge of fraud by false representation when he appeared at the Isle of Wight Crown Court last Friday. The court heard the fraud was discovered by the victim's grandmother, who was keeping an eye on him following the death of his parents. She described her grandson as very vulnerable, gullible and naive. Last year she visited the bank to help with his finances and found just £4,000 in his account. It should have contained £15,000 inherited from his parents, said Chris Stoper, prosecuting. Further investigations revealed the money had been sent to someone called Emma. Brown had set up a false account in her name and had asked his victim to pay for petrol so they could meet and money for new pictures. When Brown was arrested, he said he had spent the cash on hostel rooms, food and clothes as he was homeless. Rebecca Austin said Brown, who had recently served a jail term for another offence, was genuinely remorseful for his actions. Jailing him for 12 months, recorder Malcolm Gibney told Brown, "You took advantage of a particularly vulnerable young man." Now we come to the letters. Referendum needed on Undercliff. I am writing in response to the latest article in the county press entitled Lightweight Road for Undercliff, County Press 15th of the 6th. An island referendum is needed now. It is clearly evident Isle of Wight Council leader, Councillor Dave Stewart, is on a personal crusade of self-interest and business focus in reopening the Undercliff Drive. What about people's needs? In response to road closure and the impact study carried out by Bournemouth University regarding alleged financial losses to businesses and the public, Councillor Stewart needs a reality check and to be reminded that businesses up and down the country are suffering loss due to a change in shopping cultures, i.e. via the internet. With reference to the drop-in visitors to Ventnor Botanic Garden, I would suggest the reasons for that are down to extortionate admission fees, where once there was no charge, and sadly the gardens are not as welcoming as they once were. To say the Undercliff is currently a beauty spot and important for travel is nonsense, Knighton resident Sue Green states. It's such a beautiful route, so it improves tourist enjoyment. Have Sue and Councillor Stewart visited the route lately? It's dark and dismal, with overgrown vegetation and trees with no visible views of the sea. The priority of central and local government is the safety and well-being of its citizens. To reinstate the road, as Councillor Stewart states, and can take any vehicle of any weight, really, this is complete madness. This can only exacerbate the problem, as this is a vulnerable area prone to landslip, with no safety guarantees whatever work may be carried out in the future. To allow access to any vehicles on a narrow, winding carriageway is high risk, combined with environmental issues, example noise and air pollution. The key issue regarding vehicle travel through Knighton is not the road closure, but road infrastructure, which cannot accommodate current demand. In conclusion, I share the view of many residents that time and money would be better spent on more important issues, such as housing, education, care and investment in jobs. Island people should decide the future of the Undercliff Drive, not politicians. What is needed now is a referendum that truly reflects the wishes of the majority.
And here is the letter of the week, sponsored by The Price is Wight. Playground help from Rona and Alan Jenkins and the family Sandown. The 7 Jenkins Rainbow Playground at Sandham Gardens in Sandown is recently reopened after a long 6 months of closure by the Town Council, following a health and safety inspection. The playground has been sorely missed, as even during the winter months it's very well used. I would like to thank the Town Council for getting the essential new safety matting replaced and some repairs done. Also on the thank you list are Councillor Alex Lightfoot, who organised a group of volunteers to rub down and repaint the equipment, Hydramar at Sandown for their invaluable support, and all the fantastic individuals who came down and worked their socks off. Last but not least, thank you to the playground's neighbours, the Sandown Bowls Club, who have allowed us to use their electricity, water, loan of ladders, and they even cut the grass for the opening. And we have now launched a Just Giving page and opened a bank account for fundraising. This is to replace a piece of special needs equipment which sadly had to be removed. Please watch out for Social Medina and the press for more details and help if you can.
Celebrate our NHS from Miles Clark and Ryde. The Care Quality Commission must perform its audit. The county press must inform without favour, but it is unfortunate the lack of context is so misleading of our NHS Isle of Wight. For 10 weeks I have had the remarkable experience that thousands of islanders have had. From point of need to best solution with unstinting care. 3 doctors, 4 consultants, nurse practitioners, pharmacists and so on. Clerical staff and administrators with precise and reassuring information. This is the culmination of 2 millennia of humanity's greatest idea, love your enemy. The point of need is not a point of division of worthy from unworthy, deserving from undeserving. All are my neighbour. The escorted from Parkhurst and society's worthies sit in line. The nearest point to a civilised society we'll ever witness, and mostly we know and celebrate it.
Wake up, folks. This is from W.H. Bromwich of Cowes. And having listening to the What is the Future for Isle of Wight Health Services debate, I can't help but acknowledge how neatly the journey to this point has been choreographed. Having driven many of St Mary's services into crisis, conditions are now ripe to slice up what remains and divide it among the private sector. The Isle of Wight National Health Service Dermatology Service is already subcontracted to Lighthouse Medical Limited. Hospital staff are increasingly being provided by private sector agencies. Much of St Mary's patient rehabilitation will soon be outsourced to private sector care home providers. Terminally ill patients, estimated to have less than 3 years to live, will come under Mountbatten's care. Many medical specialisms will move to the mainland. When the sleepy Isle of Wight awakes, people will say, "Whatever happened to our hospital?" And those who engineered its demise will, no doubt, also be long gone. Job done.
Shut up over harbour, from John Jeffreys in Bembridge. I see from the article by Emily Pearce, County Press of 15th of June, that Bembridge harbour owners, Fiona and Malcolm Thorpe, have been the subject of yet another petulant tirade from Jeremy Gully. Like most Bembridge residents and harbour users, I am aware of the general background of mismanagement and lack of investment that preceded the Thorpe's ownership. I understand the Bembridge Harbour Trust was formed during the previous ownership in the hope of saving the harbour from the ravages of that mismanagement. When the BHT didn't or couldn't buy the harbour, it was saved by the Thorpes, without whose very considerable and urgent investment in dredging, in particular that harbour, would now be virtually unnavigable. Not much more than a bird sanctuary. I believe in the put up or shut up approach. Over a decade after Malcolm Thorpe put up the investment, it's long past time for Mr. Gully to shut up.
Mm-hmm. And patient travel is still an issue. And this is a letter from Aaron Bosky of Wight. One of the issues raised at the National Health Service meeting was not just the inconvenience to patients and relatives, but the cost of travel incurred as a result of patients being transferred to the mainland. It was acknowledged by the panel that this was an important issue, and they have been looking into it. Why have the residents of the Isle of Wight not been offered a solution for so long? Perhaps the National Health Service and the Isle of Wight Council do not consider this to be a worthy or high priority, despite their repeated statements to the contrary.
Thanks for the loos, from Helen Goodman, Chair of Older Voices Newport. I would like to thank Councillor Jeff Brodie and the Parish Council on behalf of Older Voices Isle of Wight for providing toilet facilities in Newport Bus Station. We much appreciate the time and effort that has gone into dealing with the situation after facilities were removed and are now happy to have suitable amenities available to us. It was of great importance to the older community on the island.
Now, there's a lot of fuss about the new chap who's running the USA, Mr. Trump. And there's a letter here, a little one, from Alexander Hopkinson Woolley of Bembridge, who says, I think our MP should be careful not to underrate Trump. If there is anyone who could single-handedly bankrupt the USA, Trump is that man. So that's what he thinks of him.
I saw greeting for Isle of Wight visitors from Leslie Payton, Australia. What an eyesore the screen is separating the pier and trace station at Ryde. My husband and I were born on the island 73 years ago, moved away and return every year for our summer break and to visit family. When we arrive and see the derelict screen, it upsets us to know this is the first thing visitors see as they step onto our beautiful island for their holidays. We would love to see it pulled down and replaced by an eye-catching new screen, perhaps with a seaside theme or island picture. Hopefully, on our return next summer, we shall see a fabulous new screen.
And there are many thanks from L.M. Empson of Ventnor, who says, Please, may I take this opportunity to thank the Southern Water men who went far and beyond the call of duty to make sure an older Ventnor resident was cared for and her water restored. They showed such kindness and made sure she had bottled water until her cold tap worked. Thank you all for showing compassion and concern.
Rethink time for Ryde plan, from Phil Netterton, Ryde. It is instructive to note Ryde School had their appeal against the Isle of Wight Council rejected because the planning inspector concluded the proposal would fail to preserve the character and appearance and thus the significance of the conservation area. The public benefits would not outweigh this harm, and so the proposal would conflict with Isle of Wight policies DM2, DM11 and SP5 of the core strategy and the framework. One has to wonder why the local planning authority and the council planning committee now support an application which proposes a building of near identical dimension. Time for a rethink, perhaps.
Boarding House Blues from David Parkis of Ryde Boarding House Blues 2. Thank you, RABH. Thank you, neighbours. Thank you, Ken. Thank you, Planning Committee. Well, some of them. Thank your inspector for rejecting that appeal. Sorry, Ryde School, we know how you feel. We feel the same about your second attempt for treating your neighbours with utter contempt by pushing ahead with this unsightly mass which those Tory councillors decided to pass. Subject, we know, to various conditions which doubtless will involve numerous submissions. Negotiating, amending, perhaps some give and take. Please scrap the thing now, for goodness sake. The planning committee are clearly mistaken with the decision they have taken to approve the monster's second application and cause so much local consternation. And there are alternatives which would enhance our town, meet your objectives and win neighbours round, preserve the playing fields and lovely green spaces, and prevent you have more eggs on your faces. So if you like poetry, that's it.
Now we go to looking back. 100 years ago, June the 22nd, 1918. The fruit crop was scarce and disappointing due to the bad growing conditions of the year. Late frosts and abnormal attacks of insect pests meant the pears and apples produced were very poor, while plums were a complete failure. Islanders were also made aware that blight, a potato disease, had ruined the potato crops. Island man Private A.J. Williams wrote to the county press while visiting the ancient city of Ludd. He said, "The place is of immense interest to Brits, as it is the reputed birthplace of our patron saint St. George." He said the churches, architecture and paintings were very beautiful, and he saw St. George's marble tomb.
And now, if you're a little younger, 75 years ago, June the 19th, 1943. The people of Cowes were praised after the town achieved its formidable Wings for Victory target of £100,000. A dance at Northwood House, a fete in Northwood Park, a model display of victory, a stamp sale and many school events contributed to the grand total. The money was used to pay for 5 Mosquito aircraft. Then a fire gutted 4 thatched cottages at Littletown, Wootton. The buildings were completely destroyed, along with most of the occupants' possessions. The fire service was handicapped as the nearest water supply was about 3/4 of a mile away. Oh dear.
50 years ago, June the 15th, 1968, the 43-foot 8-ton Noah's Ark, a boat rebuilt by a Newport lorry driver in his spare time, was successfully launched at the River Medina. Peter Cheek devoted more than 3,000 leisure hours to the project, which resulted in a luxury boat for the price of a small second-hand car. He originally salvaged the derelict hull from Benbridge Harbour. Benbridge School became the first school in Hampshire to forsake yards, feet and inches in favour of the metric system at its athletic event. The school held the annual athletic championships, and due to the new system, all running events were slightly altered. The times were taken at both the old and the new distances.
And 25 years ago, that's June the 18th, 1993, the Tory MP for Gosport, Peter Viggers, was pulled from the Solent during the Round the Island race. Mr. Viggers was thrown into rough seas off the Noodles when the wire rail snapped on the boat. He'd been in the water for 14 minutes before he was being hauled to safety aboard the Sigma 35 yacht Beetle. He said, "I have no doubt I owe my life to the crew. I think I would have drowned within minutes." And 2 Medina Tory councillors were asked to pay £120,000 out of their own pockets to cover unauthorised extra payments made in the management of Ryde Arena. Lib Dem representative Jeff Manners said the district auditor indicated to him they could be surcharged for money paid out against the council's own financial regulations. Mr. Manners said the matter was typical of the council's neglect, so brace yourself.
10 years ago, June the 20th, 2008, an Ireland wannabe photographer secured his life dream, a double spread in Vogue magazine. Oscar May's ethereal picture, which featured Medina High School student Bridie Riley, beat the other competitors at the London College of Fashion. He said, "I am shocked to have won." The captain of Newport Rowing Club said he believed vandals who attacked the club were seeking revenge. A fire near the club the previous evening had sparked a confrontation between the club and a group of youths. Members of the club believed the vandalism, The boathouse covered with graffiti, wood panelling set alight and a damaged wall had been in retaliation for the confrontation.
And we now have a flag link with the Isle of Wight built ship. The HMS Arethusa was built and launched at J.S. White's shipyard in 1963, and commissioned in 1965. Her first crew took her to the Mediterranean and then to the Far East, Australia, South Africa, South America, West Africa, and back to the UK. And recently, a member of that first crew, Dave Butler, spotted an article in a Royal Navy Association publication from Trish Snook, living in Australia. Mrs. Snook's husband, who had served in the Royal Navy, had recently died, and among his possessions Mrs. Snook found a Royal Navy ensign with HMS Arethusa written on it. It also has signatures of crew members and the year 1979 written on it. And during HMS Arethusa's first commission, she had visited Australia, and several members of her crew had disembarked at Sydney to continue an expedition across Australia to Albany on the west coast, where they would be picked up by the ship. And over a decade after that first visit, HMS Arethusa once again visited Australia, and once again crew members took an expedition across the continent. And during that 1979 expedition, the participants gave out Royal Navy ensigns during their travels to communities that offered support during their journey. And these ensigns were signed with the ship's name and the crew members making up the expedition. And one of the members of the 1978-9 crew, Paul Edgingham, who led the expedition and signed the ensign, also spotted the Royal Naval Association article and contacted Mrs. Snook, and arrangements had been made for it to be given to him, as she was keen to find a proper home for the item.
Angels of the Wartime Skies. The Isle of Wight has a strong connection to those courageous pilots who flew in the Women's Air Transport Auxiliary, ATA, in the Second World War. The well-known Mary Ellis was recently given freedom of the Isle of Wight and still lives in Sandown. Another of those pioneering female pilots was Benetta Willis, who lived in Bembridge for more than 30 years. Benedetta Willis, née Day, was born in Famagusta, Cyprus in 1914. She first arrived in the UK aged 10 to attend boarding school and went on to study a degree in architecture, which was unusual for women at the time. Her love of flying was sparked shortly afterwards when she bought a second-hand de Havilland Gypsy Moth aeroplane and learnt to fly, making use of a government project to train more pilots through affordable flying lessons. During that time she met her husband, a flying instructor called Charles Willis. She named the small two-seater plane Vagabond and flew with Charles in it to the Isle of Wight for their honeymoon in 1938. When the Second World War broke out, the couple had a 3-month-old daughter. As the war rumbled on, there was a growing need for civilian pilots to ferry aircraft around the country. The production of aircraft was increasing and the number of RAF pilots was falling because of casualties. The ATA was set up so civilian pilots could move aircraft around the country for factories and maintenance bases to airfields, freeing up RAF pilots. By this time, Benedetta had a second daughter, and in 1941, encouraged by her husband, who was by then serving in the RAF, she applied to join the ATA. After training, she began flying aircraft to airfields all over the country. At the time, she was one of only 50 female pilots in the ATA, working alongside a much larger group of men. Without the benefit of modern navigational equipment, the delivery missions could be dangerous. Adverse weather conditions was the main hazard to the ATA. 2 of Benedetta's friends were killed when they flew into hills in bad weather. Benedetta's only flight accident in the ATA was when she was landing an amphibious walrus aircraft and misjudged the wind, damaging one of the floats. Benedetta flew more than 40 different types of aircraft, everything from the single-seated Spitfires right up to the large Wellington bombers. which they had to fly without a co-pilot and without even a radio, just a compass, stopwatch and map to find the airfields. Switching between the different aircraft was something ATA pilots had to get used to. Benedetta and her fellow pilots would often make several flights a day. It was important to move new aircraft from the factories as soon as possible because of the risk of bombing raids. Benedetta's logbook shows she visited more than 100 airfields around the UK. Meanwhile, her husband Charles had a privileged position in the RAF with duties including VIPs such as Winston Churchill around Europe. The two of them never knew where they would be next, and sometimes they bumped into each other by chance at airfields across the country. Benedetta had to stop flying after 2 years in the ATA when she found out she was pregnant again, and she spent the next few years raising her family. The next time she flew was in the 1950s with the RAF Volunteer Reserve. In 1953, Benedetta became the second woman ever to receive her RAF wings. The last time she flew was in 1954, because after that, civilian flying became too expensive. She and Charles retired to the Isle of Wight in the early 1970s, living in Bembridge and taking up sailing, with Charles eventually taking on the role of harbour master. Charles died in 1990 and Benedetta died at the age of 94 in 2008. 3 months before her death, she was invited to 10 Downing Street, where Prime Minister Gordon Brown presented her with her ATA veteran badge.
And Malcolm Mime wants to tell about festival highlights for the over 40s. So if you're over 40, listen to this. If you are not attending this weekend's 50th anniversary Isle of Wight Festival, or if you are reading this article after the weekend, then save yourself some time and stop reading right now, as this is Malcolm Mime's Essential Guide to the Isle of Wight Festival 2008 for the over 40s who live on the island and won't be camping. Right then, now I've got rid of all those boring lot who can't be bothered to attend to the one event in the Isle of Wight events calendar that should be as compulsory to every islander. Let me give you hip and happening. Baby boomers and Generation X lot the heads up where you need to be and when this weekend. And Friday, at last year's festival, we maturer music fans spent most of the Friday night at the Big Top, where we saw Alison Moyet, who got better with age, with age, followed by the Pretenders, who remain as great as ever. We ignored the main stage, which had run DMC, who we didn't like first time round, and David Guetta, who just twiddled with a few knobs. This year will be the opposite, as the only acts in the Big Top on Friday any of us oldies have heard we are of Feeder, who wasn't our era, and Chasten's status, which we only know about because one teenage kids have mentioned them. My advice is to arrive early and head straight to the main stage to watch Bang Bang Romeo. They are a personal favourite of festival organiser John Giddings, and for once you've seen their mesmerising singer Anastasia Walker in action. You'll see why not only has she got the incredibly powerful voice, but she puts so much energy into the songs that you just can't take your eyes off her. Also on the main stage is the incredibly talented Rita Ora and the wonderful Chick, who will have you bobbing along and embarrassing your kids. Not that your kids will be with you, as they will have gone off as soon as you arrive. They're useful for a lift and some spending money, but that's it. The Script aren't really a band that grab me, which is just as well, but because without fail at about 3 p.m, 9 p.m, I will bump into someone I haven't seen for about 15 years, and then spend the next hour or two catching up. It happens to you too, right? Once you've finished your catch-up, you'll realise that you have missed most of Casaban's set and decided to head home, and the kids can catch the bus. Whereas on Saturday,
Saturday, I'm expecting Saturday to be the best day of the festival, if only for the headline acts of Liam Gallagher and Depeche Mode. Once again, there is no one in the big top I want to see, and the only other act on the main stage that has caught my eye is Jessie J, who, when she played in 2012, was sensational. Liam Gallagher's set will feature a number of Oasis classics to sing along to, plus songs from his highly acclaimed #1 debut solo album, As You Were. As for Depeche Mode, if anyone is going along expecting to hear New Life, I Just Can't Get Enough, and any of those other hits from 1981-82, they are going to be very disappointed. They don't play those songs anymore, but they will throw in classics such as Personal Jesus, Everything Counts, and Enjoy the Silence. The song I'm really looking forward to hearing live is Where's the Revolution, from their most recent album Spirit. And on Sunday, we have the Isle of Wight's very own Reminders opening on the main stage. The other acts not to be missed on the main stage are Sheryl Crow, Camila Cabello, and the highlight of the day, Van Morrison. The baby boomers will all head to the Big Top on Sunday afternoon for the last ever chance to see the Pretty Things, who are splitting up at the end of this year, but they aren't a band that ever grabbed my attention, so I stick with Camila Cabello. I'm where the kids are at. As to the finale, it is a toss-up between the Killers on the main stage or Travis in the Big Top, or leaving early to avoid the traffic. Whichever acts you choose, it will no doubt be yet another great weekend. It's about time the Isle of Wight Council recognised just how much John Giddings has done for the island and grant him the freedom of the country. Where is the customer service on the Isle of Wight? I am fed up with substandard, unreliable, badly trained and basically non-responsive businesses on our island. Here are a few examples. Of the 3 companies we called to give a quote for photovoltaic cells, solar power for the Luddites among us, only 2 turned up to give a quote. Of the 2, one didn't turn up on the day, didn't phone until the next day, didn't give a time on the day we rearranged, eventually turned up, chose entirely the wrong side of the road for maximum sunlight, and eventually set a cheaper quote than the other one, who set a day, time and showed up, gave the right advice, a slightly more expensive quote, and called when he said he would. Guess who got the job? I phoned and left a message with a professional declutterer who advertised themselves on Facebook. They never got back to me. I paid for a puppy package of 4 sessions with a dog trainer. I then had to chase them for the appointments for the sessions. I gave up after the 3rd session when said trainer frightened our puppy so much we cannot get her to go up the stairs. We asked the trainer to help us with upside down house, so quite important. We didn't bother to ask for a refund. Of 2 window companies, one fitted a window that broke the first time we opened it, promised to send off for the part that had failed and get back in contact. After a year of phoning them, we gave up. Another company came 3 times to fix some French doors, failed every time and couldn't spot the fact the building the doors were in had subsided, causing the problem. I've practically given up eating out. For example, last Sunday we went to a village pub known for its excellent Sunday lunch. I don't eat red meat, but was craving a good roast dinner. The only meats available were rare beef or pork belly. So we left and went to another establishment that was offering a carvery. Knowing this place of old, I didn't expect to be able to get a table. Only a couple of tables were occupied, which at peak Sunday time should have rung alarm bells. However, we went for it. Roast beef for carnival husband and turkey for me. The meat was stone cold, as were the plates. The veg was tepid, some swimming in water. The roast potatoes were the opposite of crispy and were also cold. The manager asked us how our food was. Not wanting to make a fuss, I said it was a bit cold, rather than launch into a forensic account of just why this plate of food was a disappointment. The manager rushed off and returned a few minutes later with a probe of some kind, telling me that she had personally checked everything and it was all 70 degrees. Just how was I supposed to respond? Oh, yes, the probe is right and I'm a filthy liar. We simply paid our bill and left, with the manager plaintively saying as we walked out of the door, "This is not what we do. This is not the standard we aspire to." Well, madam, what are you going to do about it? I've given up on massages too. One spa, which promised your choice of oils and pressure, delivered no choice of oils. Time constraints, according to Masseur. And her interpretation of firm pressure amounted to being stroked by a hummingbird feather. Of another two who came to my house, one talked all the way through about her personal life, and I found myself being asked for and giving advice. The other's promised firm sports massage was so feathery it was unbearably ticklish. When she asked for feedback, and I said, despite telling her at least twice a bit more pressure would be good, I felt the massage hadn't been firm enough. She became tearful and defensive, and I felt even more tense by the time she left, and paid £50 for the privilege. I could go on and on and on. But my point is simply, if any business, big or small, wants a good reputation and a solid, loyal customer base, then they need to show the customer they deliver the goods they offer at a good standard, reliably and in a timely fashion. The island is a small place, and word of mouth travels very fast. This can be a business's best friend or worst enemy. It's up to them.
Now, here's some general things that we see in the paper. Here's something from Jamie, who brings Joseph home. The dream came true for the Island Savoyards when they secured James Buckley for the lead role in their coming production of Joseph and the Technicolor Dreamcoat. Jamie, who's 29, who started out on stage at Shanklin Theatre at just 9 years old, is returning there as Joseph, having spent 2 years on the UK tour, including a long stint as an understudy to leading man Joe McElderry. In his time on tour, he had several opportunities to go on as Joseph and knows the role inside out. Jamie's love of the stage was ignited when he started with Shanklin Stagecoach at the age of 9. He said, "I wasn't very good at school, so my mum sent me to the theatre, as I loved singing. And I got my big break at Shanklin Theatre when I played Oliver at the age of 11 and performed it all through the summer season, and that's when I got the bug for the stage. I did shows at Shanklin Theatre until I was 15, and then at 16 I was lucky enough to get a scholarship to Tring Park Arts Educational School, where I studied musical theatre. And at 18 I got into Guildford School of Acting, where I earned my BA Honours in musical theatre. And after I left Guildford, I was lucky enough to travel the world, singing on a great cruise liner, and then went straight into the show Rent in London. I then did various pantos up and down the country before I got my big dream to appear in the Bill Kenwright UK tour of Joseph, where I understudied Lloyd Daniels from the X Factor and Joe McElderry, the X Factor winner. I then went on tour Europe in the Rocky Horror Picture Show, but sadly I became ill and had to come home to the Isle of Wight. It just so happened the Island Savoyards were doing Joseph, and they approached me about playing the role. And I snapped up the chance to bring my title role into my hometown, as my family never got to see me play Joseph. And I'm overwhelmed with happiness to be playing the role at the theatre where it all started for me. I've had a lot of health programmes recently, and this show has brought me back to a happy and healthy place, and I can't wait for everyone to see this wonderful cast. And there are four shows at Shanklin Theatre on the Saturday and Sunday, July the 28th and the 29th. So if you want to go and see that, that's when it's on.
Well, that's all for today. So from me, Vivian, goodbye.
And it is awful, so goodbye.
This is the BBC.
This is In Touch, the magazine programme for people like me who are blind or partially sighted. I'm Peter Wight. Thanks for downloading this week's edition. Good evening. Tonight, the RNIB redundancies, which it's feared could affect some of the most vulnerable blind people, and the professional photographer who's hidden his visual problems for decades.
Forward planning was my two middle names. I had a plan for every occasion and then a plan for the plan if that went wrong.
And you'll hear more from newspaper photographer David Katz later in the programme. But first, Talk and Support is a telephone service run by the Royal National Institute of Blind People to provide exactly what its name suggests, a place to share and swap information and provide mutual support. But it's one of the first services to feel the effects of a package of redundancies which In Touch listeners were warned was coming to deal with the RNIB's well-publicised financial problems, a budget deficit of almost £13 million in the financial year up to March 2017. The charity says the review could see less than 100 redundancies, but will ultimately help it make a bigger difference to blind and partially sighted people in an efficient and sustainable way. But Diane Benjamin is worried about the future of the Talk and Support service. She's one of the many volunteers who take part in more than 100 Talk and Support groups. And she appeared in an RNIB video explaining the work they do.
RNIB Talk and Support Service is a service for blind and partially sighted people that brings them together in groups of 6 on the telephone so that they can chat and support each other. It's mainly older people that are part of it, so they don't go out so much anyway. So it's about getting them together. A lot of older people don't have anybody to talk to. They may not see anybody for a whole week.
Well, 3 RNIB staff who, among other things, help connect the callers to the discussions will leave through redundancy. You heard from Diane Benjamin in that promotional video, and she told me what she did as a volunteer.
I bring in the participants and then I encourage them to talk if they need encouraging.
And what kind of things do they talk about?
Family, politics, even religion, programmes that they've seen, books that they've read. They just talk about everything and anything.
And give us more of an idea of the kind of people who are using this service. Who are they?
At least 40% must be in their 80s. Most of them don't go out a lot. A lot of them are on their own. They just have carers popping in occasionally. They compare sometimes what their conditions are, but most of the time they treat the group as a social group. They're talking to friends and they're often their only friends. The other 5 people in the group are often their only friends. Yeah.
Now, 3 staff who connect the callers to the conference calls will be affected by these redundancies. Explain your concern about that.
My concern is about how it's going to happen when those people have gone. They do have volunteers, but they have so many groups. I can't see how they're going to have enough staff to bring in all the people to the groups.
So just paint a picture of what would normally happen. There's a lady or a gentleman in their 80s sitting at home. What would normally happen to get them connected?
They'd be sitting by their telephone and they would answer the call, and the call manager will say, "Are you ready for the group?" And they will say yes, and then they bring them into the group and say to me, the facilitator, "Diane, we've now got so-and-so with us."
So in a way that contacting is done for them, essentially.
Yes.
Now, David Newbold, who's the RNIB's Specialist Services lead, he says the changes are designed to make the help they offer more efficient and sustainable. He added that no groups will stop and they won't change, but they'll be encouraging people to dial into the conference calls themselves. What's your reaction to that?
My reaction to that is I'm just appalled. I've got 3 groups, which means I've got 18 people. Most of them would not be proficient enough to use the telephone. One, they know they won't be able to ring because they don't know numbers. And then I understand with a conference call you have to have a code or something.
A password or something like that.
And you have to be fairly quick to get that into the phone.
But he also says if they're really uncomfortable with that, they'll provide help.
I would like to know how they would provide help. How are they going to know who's in need of this assistant? Who's going to assess them? And who's going to reassess people that are coming into their 80s and 90s? Who's going to be there?
The RNIB also told us that this method could modernise the service by increasing the user's independence. Isn't that a fair point? It's good to encourage people's independence.
Yes, it is when they're young and they want to be independent and they want to do these things. But we all know that older people are the people that lose their sight, and they're going to be the ones that are sidelined, basically. They're the silent majority. They won't be able to complain. They won't know how. They won't have the ability to ring in and complain.
Now, you're a volunteer getting involved with this service. What would you like to say to the RNIB about this?
I have several questions that I would like you to answer on how things are going to happen. Who's going to assess people? I'd like to ask the RNIB who was consulted, how many of the users were consulted about this?
That's Diane Benjamin, and we'll be talking to the RNIB about their redundancies and many other aspects of their future strategy next month. Something else we're planning to take a longer look at is Access to Work. Now, that's the government's long-standing programme to help disabled people compete in the workplace. It does this by providing financial help with assistive technology, extra fares, human assistance and other things besides. But recently we've been hearing from blind listeners about what they're describing as sudden and unexplained rule changes in the system, which is making it difficult to use, and it sometimes results in a loss of the service altogether. People like Martin Conway, who at the beginning of this year explained why he had suddenly had his Access to Work payments stopped.
I've been told by Access to Work in December that they won't make any further payments to me until I produce a contract of employment between myself and the support worker. Now, this is not something in 25 years of using Access to Work I've ever been asked to do. And in fact, although I'm a social worker and maybe reasonably competent, I have no real experience in actually drawing up a contract of employment, which normally an HR department would do. I mean, they've just literally told me to look on the internet and take a blueprint from there.
Well, that was Martin Conway, and we're still hearing other examples of sudden rule changes and payments being stopped until the situation is resolved. Well, if you'd like to tell us your experience of Access to Work, positive or negative, you can call our action line for 24 hours after the programme on 0800 044 044. You can email in touch at bbc.co.uk. You can also download tonight's and other editions of the programme from our website. Someone who has emailed us is Krupali Pashotam. She was responding to our report on difficulties with the Disabled Students Allowance.
I found the recommendations about equipment didn't fit my needs, and they weren't suitable for the course I've been accepted on, which is teacher training. The majority of my study will be on placement, meaning I'll be in multiple locations throughout the course. I've taken this into account and have said that carrying cumbersome equipment isn't suitable for me. The time it takes to set this up wouldn't be appropriate, and it cuts into my teaching time. I've repeatedly stressed my concerns. If visually impaired students face these types of obstacles now, it will discourage them from pursuing successful careers. Someone really needs to consider the impact this process can have.
Finally today, In Touch listeners are used to hearing about visually impaired people who've taken on jobs, sports, hobbies, which on the face of it seem difficult if not impossible. And they succeed. But they don't come much more counterintuitive than the case of David Katz. For many years, David has been a highly respected Fleet Street photographer whose pictures have captured some of the biggest names of modern times. Margaret Thatcher, Tony Blair, David Beckham, members of the royal family. And yet during that time, hardly anyone knew that he had a cocktail of eye conditions, strabismus, nystagmus, astigmatism, which seriously affect your ability to control the movement of your eyes and therefore to focus. It's only recently, with his professional reputation secure, that David has felt able to reveal the fact and talk about it openly. Well, he's been talking openly to us, and I asked him how he got started.
I fell in love with the camera since I was 7 years old. My father had a nice camera and he liked to take pictures, but he gave me the camera because I nagged him so much, and I was seeing things in a certain way through my condition, which also includes ocular albinism, which all the others come from.
So as you were growing up, what kind of effects was the eye condition having on just your ordinary life as a young boy?
I loved football and I was a very keen Arsenal supporter. Well, probably fanatic would be a better word to use. My dad wasn't able to take me because he knew I wouldn't be able to see, and he was correct. At about 10 years old, we found out about a wonderful lady called Janet Silver at Moorfields, who was responsible at that time for what I referred to as low visual aids, which were a bit bulky and cumbersome, but they developed at that point a very small pair of powerful binoculars that looked discreet but helped me see. That changed the course of my life because it allowed me to be able to go to Arsenal. And the wonderful thing about that was because I couldn't watch the game as a whole, it meant through the binoculars that I had to focus in and watch only a part of the game and work out where the ball was to follow the ball. And this helped me immensely when I became a photographer to be able to follow the action, because the principle is the same through a camera.
So was that what gave you, as it were, the confidence to think, I actually might be able to do this professionally?
Absolutely. Obviously, having an eye condition from birth, I don't know exactly how regularly sighted people see. I think that it's not how far we can see, it's what we see. And I think people who are properly sighted are able to see very clearly in relation to distance and things like that. But often they miss things that we would be seeing because we're looking more closely and looking at things in a certain way.
So has that made a difference about the way you take pictures and what you're looking for?
Personally, I believe it's made a huge difference because I'm having to work harder to start with. I'm having to look harder. I was more frightened of being caught out that I missed something because I didn't see it. So I went close. But that's what all good photographers should be doing.
Can you give me an example of that, where you get going close? So the sort of things that you did, or the dangerous things that you did?
I was sent many years ago to what turned out to be one of the worst riots in London. It was between extreme right wing and extreme left wing, and they basically battled it out at Waterloo Station on the way to a concert. Instead of standing further back on a longer lens, I went in very close, and suddenly everything went dark in front of me, and I realised that someone had smashed the camera into the front of my head, which smashed my head into the back of the wall. So, I put myself in some very dangerous situations. But to be honest, I would expect other photographers at that level to do the same thing, because you have to get the images. We're not like writers that can stand a bit further back. We have to be in there.
Now, to explain your attitude to this, we perhaps have to also explain a little bit about your parents' attitude, that you had to be careful about how much you revealed it.
Very much so. I owe everything to my parents. They were told when I was 3 months old in 1966 that I was blind, and to register me as blind. They wanted to make sure they gave me every chance. They had an attitude of there's no such word as can't.
But of course you could argue that you could have had help from professionals, as it were, in helping you deal with your visual impairment. It does put a potential strain on you trying to hide it, as you have done.
Well, actually, in those days, and even quite recently, as I found out through my own research trying to help children with my condition and their parents, recently through my foundation and through my research and through my lenses, the video that I launched to come out publicly, that wasn't actually the case. There wasn't that much help, and there certainly isn't. And this is where the assistive technology these days is actually a big advantage. There's a lot more help in my generation, and up until very recently, there hasn't really been the help that there should have been.
But presumably your employers didn't know in that case.
No, I felt it was probably better that they didn't. I mean, it's one thing convincing myself, but if you said to me, we'd like you to photograph the Queen, and I'd say, oh, by the way, I'm blind, right? I think the reaction wouldn't be as positive as I would like.
But we should make it clear, you've got to Fleet Street, you've worked for papers. So what kind of strategies did you use to hide the fact, both professionally and socially?
There was no way that people could tell that I had such a serious visual impairment, but they would have been able to tell if they would have seen me trying to look at a computer screen. So when we went from film to digital, there was strategies I had to adopt to get around that.
Like what? What did you do? Because it sounds as if you probably did quite a lot of work in advance, so you knew the things that you couldn't do on the spot, as it were.
Forward planning was my two middle names. I had a plan for every occasion and then a plan for the plan if that went wrong. For instance, with computer screens, when we started to use Photoshop, by sitting night after night at home in front of the computer with my nose on the screen, I memorised where everything was on the screen. So if someone was standing behind me or even asking me advice or I was standing over them, I knew where it was on that screen. If someone gave me a computer that wasn't mine or showed me something on a computer that I wasn't familiar with, this could be problematic.
You do social things as well, don't you? I mean, like finding out about menus when you go to restaurants.
Exactly. And this was something that we now laugh about. I used to make sure that, because obviously if I was having a meeting about a job with an editor, I obviously couldn't look at the menu. So I would either get to the restaurant very early, look on the internet when I was able to, or my complete fallback was saying to the person opposite me, so what looks good on the menu? And they would tell me what they were having, and I would have what they were having, which would often lead to some really horrible meals. If someone would have found out at an earlier stage, I wouldn't have reached the level in my professional career that I went on to reach. I have a platform that people know me and respect me as a photographer. I'm able to go out and be taken seriously and be interviewed by people like yourself.
Now, earlier on, you thanked your parents for their attitude. Can I put this question to you? Haven't you actually made life more difficult for yourself than it need have been by all that hiding?
Look, probably yes, but you know what? And my mother used to apologise to me to the end of her life. Did she do the right thing? I wouldn't have it any other way. A lot of people have to suffer in different ways through one reason or another. It makes you a better person. It increases your character. It makes you stronger. It makes you more determined. And I have absolutely no regrets.
But, you know, you've got to be tough to do that, haven't you? Go that route.
Absolutely, but I wouldn't have wanted to go the other route. I would have sooner gone the tough route, made things difficult for myself and achieved everything that I've achieved, be able to make the difference that I'm now being able to make. You don't have to sit in a room, you know, like someone who thinks that life owes them something. We all have issues. Ours is to do with our eyes, or a lot of your listeners, I'm sure, have visual impairments. Everybody has something, and this is what was taught to me from a very young age. So, you know, mine happens to be with my eye. A lot of people have got far worse.
David Katz. So, to reveal or not to reveal, whether it's going for a job or online dating or whatever it is, what's your take on whether or not to disclose that you're blind or partially sighted? That's it for today. From me, Peter Wight, producer Kevin Core and the team. Goodbye.